with Earth Medicine Podcast. I'm Laurel, your host. And today we are so fortunate to have somebody that I deeply respect and admire. He is a best-selling international author. He award-winning as well. He is a singer-songwriter who has been on the Billboard chart. And he also is the host of the Alignment Podcast. And lucky me, also, he is my 7-year-old first grade classmate. Welcome, John Stringer.
Thank you, Laurel. So good to be here. So good to be here with you. And man, isn't it cool? It feels like a reunion of sorts. Such a
It
blessing.
does.
Yes.
It does. Well, my listeners know that I explore frequency medicine and natural earth medicines, and I'm so eager to start talking to you and speaking with you about your vast knowledge on the shamanic practices. And I really wanted to hone in today on shamanic practices that channel medicine specifically with animal, plant, and spirit medicines.
Mm,
So everyone needs to buckle up because John also channels,
yes.
and we'll see where this conversation takes us.
Absolutely. Excited. And one thing I'll add is that I think of myself as the transponder or the receiver, and I get to tune in and access knowing that perhaps I shouldn't have. You would think, in our normal conditioned society, but in reality, we can all access it and we get to explore ways to do it. So, thank you for inviting me. The other thing I think of is it's your experience and your curiosity, I believe, will help drive into and expand into knowing I wouldn't have even thought to think of or ask. You know what I'm saying? So that's exciting to me as well. So thank you.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we are kind of all of our own flavor, our own
Yeah,
brand, aren't we, of
exactly.
channeling the consciousness.
That's it. Yep. That's it.
Well, I wanted to lay a foundation first with what I have read, and then I would like to lead into you guiding us into a higher truth of it, just
Perfect.
to introduce people more deeply into this practice and what it is, and that it is scientifically grounded.
Beautiful.
So, I wanted to start first by acknowledging that our space-time dimension has rules, so we don't go far off the rails. And some of those rules are that E equals mc squared. Energy is collapsed matter. In that, energy is literally the signature and dictates the direction that matter exhibits itself. So our energy bodies and the energy around us ultimately compresses into this physical vehicle that we call home or our body.
Mm,
And because that's both wave and particle, we can entrain with other frequencies to hit optimal health. And we have scientific examples of this. Frequency medicine is something that's been introduced in our country and is widely accepted in the form of red light therapy, or there's also now tonality therapy with 40 hertz that we can literally watch under a microscope spontaneously heal fractured tissue.
mm,
We see stem cells that are healed through the frequency of sacred geometry, where if a dodecahedron is put next to a stem cell, it always becomes bone, etc. We know how to heal ourselves now to some extent. What still seems ambiguous, and that I would love some clarity around and to widen this conversation, is the shamanic practices of channeling these beautiful medicines from animal, plant, and spirit to condense into our physicality that ultimately becomes medicine.
mm. Beautiful. As you were speaking, the first thing that popped in is our teachers.
Mm,
That the plants, animals, and many of these can be teachers for us, not just used as something utilitarian, if you will. So the it's funny that this morning the vision I was being given prior to our talking is related, and I didn't recognize that until just now. How think of it as at some level we tend to objectify and separate, and that's part of this limited condition thinking that often will take something and then begin to separate it and not realize we are losing the relationship of the whole. For example, let's just say you have this little creature and it has a tail, this little animal, and the tail is good for something. And you rip off the tail, use the tail, and then throw the baby away. It's like, okay, that's not really the relationship we were going for, right? But in the lower levels of frequency, lower levels of consciousness that are used to creating separation and kind of missing the forest for the tree, if you will, that's what's happened with our relationship with the consciousness of these plants and these teachers and these animals and the stones, as you call it, coming back into alignment with the relationship of these teachers helps us learn how to navigate the frequencies and navigate both the utility and the relationship, where instead of harming and damaging, we're regenerating and using in harmony in a way that is best and highest for all concerned, right? So that's the first thing that dropped in. And then secondly, prior to this, it was shown this growing of almost like, okay, I'll just get it direct. So we in doing so, we tend to begin to grow these mutations, if you will, of what was originally meant to be in balance. We begin to create these mutations that don't bring the harmony in it more. Instead, it brings pain and suffering in some ways, or pain, let's just say. Suffering's optional. But like, this was the vision I was shown right before our call, and I'm like, oh wow, now I see the application to this conversation, that it's about expanding away from expanding our consciousness away from that and re-accessing this divine intelligence and perfect design, so we're back in harmony with the plants, with the animals, with the stones, and with the consciousness that teaches. Because it's not so much that you just pick up any plant or any stone and say, "You're my teacher. Nice to meet you. Help." It's more of accessing the consciousness of that it's available. And all we have to do is ask. All we have to do is seek and inquire, and that consciousness will teach and guide and show us what is effective, what is needed, what is perfect for whatever situation and whatever we're inquiring. And it's like George Washington Carver once said, or at least the quote that I read, said something along the lines of, and for those that don't know, George Washington Carver was this amazing, I guess, scientist, you could call him, a professor, but he studied plants and came up with all these applications, most famous for the peanut and the 300 plus applications he came up with using the peanut, right? And he once said that God speaks through the plants. Does that not sound like a shaman to you?
It does.
It totally does, right? I was like, this guy was a shaman working in the lab. You know? But the cool part about it is the mechanics of it, the way it works, I'm inquiring about and feeling like I already know. So I'm asking for the words, like, okay, what exactly? The mechanics of it is when we're attuning to anything, like, it's almost like that intention that allows us to calibrate and tune into and expand our awareness into any level of consciousness we'd like to access. When we're working with the teachers, like the animals, when we're working with the teachers of the plants, we can call upon that knowing, that information, that guidance, that direction, and then, like George Washington Carver, begin to intuit and follow that inspired action. Follow, and the plants will lead us, the stones will lead us, and the animals will lead us. But there's a level of consciousness that you can think of as the domain of the plants, the domain of the animals, etc. And by allowing ourselves to access these realms, we can receive information in different ways. And it allows us to take that information, use it as inspired action to apply to certain situations, create certain outcomes, results, etc. That's how I'm hearing how it works. So the plants will guide us now. The actual structure, like the way I'm hearing it is there's a structural, like that's procedural, but there's a structural part of attunement that has to happen for us to be able to access that kind of information on demand and easily. And it's both a function of strengthening our will through our practices, like ritual and practice, where we begin to strengthen our will and we begin to expand that awareness, where we choose through the will, through desire, through intention. That's almost like moving the dial and tuning in. And then we're able to more readily access these wonderful teachers. However, the other side of it is the state that is within us, like when we have the doubts, the fears, the different things, moving that stuff aside, right? That's where the ritual and the practice comes in to help us move that aside, get out of the way, and then we're able to access more clearly, begin to see. Like this morning when I was doing my thing and I'm not even aware of the time, I'm tuning in, I'm listening, I'm like, hey, okay, there was a lot of stuff in the way. And that's at that lower level of consciousness that we get, tuned into. So a lot of the practice and the work is about clearing that. That's what's muddying things up and blocking, fears of just life and, concern of money and this and all this confusion and all this stuff that's there. That's okay. That's like the mud. It's part of the ingredients. It's actually part of the nutrients. But until we actually begin to, like the plant, decide to, okay, let me surrender, break down, and let this desire break through, and begin to transcend being blocked by that. Until we do that, it's difficult to receive the light and process it and turn it into what it needs to be. So that's the what's the word? The long and dirty of what's been coming through for me around this.
Love that. And when I got into all the research for my Earth Medicine series that I'm doing, the next episode's almost completed, and it's the science of frequency medicine. I started researching the shamanic practices and everything that you just said. I wanted to break down scientifically two things that actually can be measured that completely validate what you just said. One is the noosphere is what they're calling the area that is measurable, where the consciousness as a singularity frequency of a species lives, and it actually is part of our atmosphere. And the noetic sciences study this, and actually space travel depends on it. So NASA actually follows the Schumann resonance, which I know you're aware of, which is like 7.8 or hertz, or I can't remember exactly. It's 7 point something, just over 7.5. And a human's average resonance is 5.5-ish. So what they have discovered, though, is in tracking the Schumann resonance, it grew out of Harvard, the Noetic Sciences, and then also the Global Consciousness Project grew out of Princeton University. And then they combined and became the Noetic Sciences. And they are now in 70 countries with hundreds of engineers and scientists. And they take measurements of the face of our planet as frequencies modulate. And what they now know they can measure is the consciousness of a species. And the way that they know this is through hundreds of experiments where they had a Qigong day, where there was a meditation for peace. And in the path of the minds of the time of day as it transcended across the population that was participating, you follow the resonance on the face of the earth. 9/11 was the very first one where they actually monitored it by accident. And it's all monitored from satellites, by the way. So this frequency is something that is physical and measurable. 9/11, as the news spread, they show the resonance of fear and anxiety spread across the population that directly followed the path of when the news broke to various populations. So we now know that we can measure the average resonant frequency of any given species. And the other fascinating thing is we don't just have the ability to measure the frequency of a collective consciousness of a species, you also have collective consciousness of a family line or a culture or a religion. Any superorganism displays this behavior, and it's part of complex systems theory. So what you just said is measurable as far as that we are able to tap into it as long as we're aligned with the frequency. The other fascinating thing that you said that and I want to back this up with science to be really careful here, is that the quantum physics principle of superposition, we now know that's true because we've actually measured the same photon of light being in three spaces at one time within a controlled environment. And anybody can go and read the information on this. So we know that superposition is possible. So the other thing that we know is real are scalar waves. So if you know that something can be if on a static line that is a wave, it's a standard wave pattern that goes through not just our dimension, but all dimensions. And you know that you can move anywhere on that line instantaneously. And you know that something can be in two places at once. You start to build the framework for how space-time allows for shamanic channeling to occur, right? It becomes measurable, it becomes accepted, it becomes safe for people that might not be on the spiritual path to the point to accept channeling animal medicine. That might sound a little woo, but the framework scientifically is exactly in place to support this. And this is leading me into my next question for you. I'm looking at my notes because I was reading earlier. I've been doing a lot of work around shadow work, as you know. And trauma is when we begin to subconsciously fracture. We have a fracturing that starts to begin at a trauma point, and we have the option of either regaining everything through shedding the trauma, or we store it in our body and our subconscious will split it off and deal with it later. And then what we're left with is a piece of our subconscious that's displaying as personality, and the trauma personality we mistake as ourselves. And we then begin to vibrate at that fractured state, which makes it harder to connect in with what's above.
That's so
So
good. Yeah.
knowing this, it leads into my next question, and then I'll let you riff on this,
Okay.
is that Native Americans are saying that there is a distinct difference between a spirit animal, a totem animal, and a shadow totem animal. Shadow totem animal is the one that we probably see all over the place because it has an ingredient to it that can help us where we are. Then there is the totem animal that shows up when we need it during our life or throughout our life. But then there's the spirit animal that I read, and all of this I'm giving over to you in just a moment so that you can clarify all of this if it's true or not. But the spirit animal is something that is someone's vibrational equivalent. So you have a spirit animal, you have a spirit plant, and you have a spirit mineral equivalent. But then you also have it in your totem and your shadow totem. So all of this is fairly new to me. I know the framework is there that all of this is extraordinarily real, but I would love it if you could tap in, because you do it so beautifully, What are the differences between these? Is that a real thing? Are those real classifications? And then how do we use it as medicine to heal ourselves and where do we start?
Great question. I'm going to do a combination of writing and just tuning in. And by the way, for those that are curious, like, what am I doing? The practice that I love to use, I use this real simple practice called align, allow, let go, and tune in to expand my awareness and just access different levels of consciousness and pose these questions and then let the information come through. And sometimes I do it through personality, like you were just saying. Like the first time I did it was through personality. I didn't get all the way out of the way. I combined my personality with the stream, right? Then sometimes I can completely get into, I think some people call it hypnagogic state or hypnagogic, whatever it's called. But it's getting into this state that it's almost like the personality has been set aside to allow the information to come through. So that's what I'm going to do, or attempt to do, while also writing what comes through and then speaking. So let's get into that question. So when it comes to both the information Laurel just put in, the question I'm asking is, what information is best and highest to know about that? Let's see what's it is. So let's start with the separation aspect. When we try to categorize things, it's helpful, but it's a framework, because in reality, there is a continuity and a oneness of it all. Just like we look at light and dark as two separate things, but in essence, it's all one. It's the same with these wonderful levels. They're just a framework to look at totem, spirit, shadow, etc. So starting from there, if we look at the framework, the value of the framework is when we're working with these lower aspects and lower frequencies, it allows for integration of the whole. So it's not so much about separating, but about seeing the different aspects in the framework to bring about the integration. So we know, okay, just like temperature, low temperature is effective for this. High temperature allows you to boil. Medium temperature, there's utility in it. It's the same with these totems. You're looking at lower, middle, and high, if you will. So that framework is helpful so that we can use these wonderful aspects, but recognize that in reality, yes, these ranges that we use to classify and separate and name, etc., help us function in this lower level reality that we use words and define things, and it gives us this sense of, oh, I get it, and that's great. And that's the fun of it. That's the exploration, the adventure of it, when in reality it's just all interconnected, if that makes sense. So what is the utility? We're seeing the utility of integrating the lower aspects, or what you might call the shadow totem, is actually helping us let go of a lot of the fears, a lot of the wounded aspects of ourselves, and helping us integrate and accept and then transform the experience of those lower levels. So they have medicine for us, in other words. They are aspects of the self that need to be reintegrated, need to be healed, so that that trauma goes away. Just as you mentioned, the personality and the functions of the trauma and what ensues, one of the greatest wounds is separation that we experience when we incarnate in the first place. And many of us are looking to find our way in bringing harmony to that experience and integrating the aspects of self. So same with the wonderful spirits, totems, etc., of the animals, of the minerals, etc. We're expanding ourselves and living the very purpose of life. Life is seeking more. Life is expanding. Life's motive is more. And it's extending the source itself in all these unique ways so that we can explore it. And your exploration, being of this nature, allows you to begin to integrate, transform, bring your awareness and your presence to these wonderful aspects and begin to reclaim and help, quote, humanity shift its perspective in relation to these aspects of the self, reclaiming, dissolving even that separation, knowing that there is a harmony, knowing that we are stewards of this wonderful creation and we get to play in it and use it and receive its gifts. But we can only do that when we begin to dissolve the separation, even when it comes to, quote, what we've elevated as science and begin to look at as some deified construct, when in essence, it's more of a way of observing without bias. That's the intent, to be able to document and observe the perfection when it is untainted. But when it becomes deified and separate, it becomes dysfunctional. So this type of work and conversation can help heal even that rift, if that makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Wow. Wow. My next inquiry: how would one go about beginning the process of finding a plant, stone, or animal teacher if they are new to it? And
Great
I do
question.
know that some people are called through very extraordinary experiences, but others that are seeking, how would they find?
So the beauty is there's many ways, and what's funny, what's coming up right now is the beauty of each of our design and where we are is typically perfect for whatever our desire is. It's typically always perfect for whatever our desire is. Like we're planted in the perfect place, and then we get to decide. And here's the beauty of it is we can even, unlike being fixed in one specific spot, we can move to where the sunlight is. So that analogy means in order to find our connection, in order to find our teachers, in order to find whatever that desire is, we have a lot more agency in fulfilling that desire than we often think. But what's beautiful is it's not a matter of linear or fixed position or how we view time, etc. That's not the obstacle. The obstacle is our perspective, our perception of how things work. And that's why the laughter was coming. So, because we get so fixed that we forget that there is this aspect of ourselves that, as you were talking about, we're beginning to observe. We are not limited in any way. we have this power to access the frequencies we're looking for, the teachers we're looking for, the information we're looking for, by transcending the limited conditioned thinking, the personality, the separation. And there's this vast expanse of information that is useful and that is perfect for us as we tune into our desire. Not desire from the projection, meaning if you desired, okay, I want to access a teacher that's going to help do X, Y, and Z, right? At this level of consciousness, a plant teacher or something, whatever it be, as you begin to clarify that wonderful intention by simply asking why, what am I really seeking, and why am I seeking that, you begin to get to the essence of it. So you go from the level of form and the way you think of it to the level of meaning, Oh, it means this, a teacher that's going to do this and help with that, and the words and all of that. And then you get to sensation. And sensation is how we interact with the frequencies in themselves. So even our desire is the seed of a frequency. As we begin to inquire and clarify that intention behind the desire, that intention, what is our intent? We begin to get into the sensation and clarify the frequencies. As we clarify the frequencies, we can actually begin to fulfill the frequency instantly. There's no separation. So we instantly fulfill the frequency. And that's really the end goal. Then what transpires from that can be inspired action to bring this wonderful alignment. So let's say desiring a teacher and wanting to understand these frequencies that are going to help bring about specific results from the plants or from the minerals, what have you. Beginning to ask, why do I want to experience that, would be how I'd clarify that intention. And then as I got down to it, maybe I'd go from the level of form, the whole scenario, to the level of meaning. What does this mean to me? Oh, it means experiencing the magic and the beauty of what's accessible to us to help relieve suffering, relieve pain, or relieve whatever, right? Once we get to the lower levels of creation, this form, meaning, and sensation, we begin to experience, magic. Well, how does that feel to create that magic, that utility, to see that perfection and connection? Maybe it's exciting, maybe it's loving. Whatever it feels like to us is how we begin to interact with the frequencies. Then we give that to ourselves. We instantly manifest it, in other words. So that's the first part of embodying the frequency and vibration that is a match to what we think we're actually looking for. But in reality, that's what we're looking for. As we begin to give that to ourselves and vibrate, embodying it through practices, practical practices like meditation, like the exercise that was just spoken, asking why, meditating on it, thinking and feeling on it. We begin to align with those frequencies. And now the action and the thought that corresponds is because of what we've attuned ourselves to. And more in line with that begins to come. And then we automatically either receive and choose to follow, or receive and block. So we still have a choice, but once we've attuned, we're now going to receive that inspired action and the corresponding opportunity. And then it's up to us to step into the next action. Or we can allow fear and separation to block us from doing that and slow the process down. So staying in that place of trust, of love, and of flow, help us get to that. What we think is the end goal is simply an amplifier of the frequencies we've chosen. So let's go back to the original question of how does one go about finding that teacher? How does one go about accessing those realms and those levels? It is as simple as clarifying intention and attuning to it, because often we think we might want one thing, but when we clarify the intention and the frequency and we give that to ourselves, we amplify it, that's what we really wanted. That's the end goal. And we always have the power to fulfill any desire in any given moment. And once we do that, we stop giving the power away, and then we start trusting and listening to what life and how life is responding. We start listening to, because we're coming from a place of fulfillment. We're coming from a place of being the answer. We're coming from a place of oneness and wholeness. And suddenly life begins to bring these little things that amplify what we're choosing and correspond with what we're choosing. And it's a fascinating process. And of course, we can choose many things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's one frequency or one vibration, etc. But the predominant choices we begin to make and the more clear we can get on those frequencies. So the question for you would be, well, first I would start with, why do I even want to access those teachers? And then embodying that, that's the fastest way to actually fulfill that desire. Once the desire is fulfilled, life begins to easily show you the corresponding actions to bring that fulfillment to. Now, the other way, that's a quantum way. The other way is the linear way. That's what we're used to mostly. It's a much slower way, step by step process. So the question is, which would you prefer, right? The quantum way or the more linear way of going about the process? And that linear way is fine too. That's more of a, instead of going straight to the frequency, it's staying in the world of form and meaning primarily, not really getting familiar with the more subtle sensation and frequency. But in the world of form and meaning, we'll go about and search and look and study and look in the meaning and the thoughts and try to start connecting it and slowly activate the frequencies, and slowly the answers begin to come. And that's a fine journey. It's like taking a long, lazy walk through the park. So you get to pick your pace. And of course, any way in between. Does that make sense?
It does.
Great,
It
great.
does. And it leads me to another inquiry. When I've had three different experiences. Well, I've had multiple experiences, but I have had a very distinct emotional experience with a stone, with an animal, and with a plant. And what I experienced with the stone is an emotion so powerful that it allowed my body a moment to memorize it so that I could recall it. And what I learned post is that when you sustain a trauma and you allow yourself to fracture if you don't know any better, your subconscious not only taps down that emotion connected with the trauma, but all the little analogous emotions, the nano emotions that surround it. And so it's really hard to re-experience those until you heal the trauma. And my experience with the stone, specifically fluorite, washed through me. I was vibrating this crystal clear, courageous, capable feeling that I had not felt probably since childhood. And then being able to work with that and rememorize it in my body helped me shed whatever that I don't even have to remember what the trauma was. So that type of
Yeah.
healing, when I was open to it, of course. But then what is that when all of a sudden a stone or a mineral or a plant or an animal steps in? Is that something that you decided before you arrived on Earth that would occur? Is it something that you invite emotionally without knowing it? Is it something that what is that? Because I know many people, after having conversations about what happened to me, many people experience that. And what is that when you're gifted like that? Why does that happen?
Beautiful
And
question.
anything else you can share about that?
Sure. So, as we think about medicine, often the word antidote can come up. So, the fractures that you're talking about, it's like finding the antidote, that experience that you're speaking of. It's almost like realizing that the fractures and the ways that we have created fears and separation blocks, etc., the frequencies are often the antidote and can quickly bring us into that quantum healing experience versus this slow, long, linear experience, right? And so what you describe sounds like an experience of that. What's important to note is the design, the celestial design, if you will. People talk about soul's blueprint. Think of a celestial blueprint. That each of us has a celestial blueprint. Yes, a soul level, and then even this greater level blueprint. And in that blueprint, is by design certain experiences and certain touch points. And if we don't go have it this way, we may have it this way instead. There's freedom as well to choose. It's not like, oh, everything is fixed and you have no freedom. But just as you are experiencing an individuated point of awareness as, quote, Laurel, in a, quote, appearance of a physical feminine shell, that's by design, right? Now, can the design and the code be adjusted? Yes. But let's start with the original design. Based on that, it is the same with certain touch points or nodes or lessons in your celestial blueprint that you would have in this, quote, lifeline. Now, you have more than one lifeline, but let's just deal with this one lifeline. So in this lifeline, some of those touch points may include exactly what you've described, that by design, you are going to have this awakening, this experience, and the stone will teach you this vibration that will help be an antidote to some sort of fracture, as you call it. And there are many others, but the point being is there is a design, and it is a loving and intelligent design, almost like creating a story or a movie. Why do we do it? Because it's entertaining. Why do we do it? Because it's a nice lesson and a nice way to deliver the lesson. Why do we create media, film, and certain lessons? Well, there are intentions and agendas all sorts of ways, but let's look at the benevolent ones. The benevolent ones may be to pass on some loving lesson, but you do the whole hero's journey story to get there. And it may be many lessons. It may be to remember your power, to remember your interconnectedness and your oneness, to remember the perfection of life. But that's the reason we have many of these wonderful experiences that are like, wow, and begin to expand our awareness into more of what is possible. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense.
Great.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
I'll add something from personality. So it's funny that my own experience with this concept of antidote has been actually bringing in frequencies and tuning in. So the process that I experience is becoming aware of. One second, let me just mute this for 1 second. My son just came in. He was putting something up. I was like, "Are you done?" um, so the process of becoming first aware of what you call the fracture, often we're able to do emotionally, right? Able to sense in our emotions, oh, something's off, or oh, I feel this, and just doesn't feel good. When those emotions come up, they're often indicating where that fracture exists. The way I hear it is blocks. There are often blocks that are we have stored at different levels, right? And that trauma comes in the form of a block. As we begin to use our emotion and our awareness to be aware of it, we can bring presence to it. Now, that's an interesting thing. Presence is this ability to stop fighting and resisting and judging and fearing, but just to be with. So presence is like how people talk about being mindful or centering, etc. Presence to me is almost like an offshoot of our ability to align with the more subtle aspects of what we are and who we are, and then to bring our awareness and to not fight, but to just be with, right? When we're able to bring that type of presence to those fractured blocks, we'll call them, when we're able to do that, we're able to suddenly stop wasting energy and bring, as we're, the more present we can be with it, the more we're able to come into a harmonious state with it. But the harmonious state comes from a higher level of consciousness. So that's when, so the first step, bringing that awareness to it, letting go of the fight, being present with it, and then beginning to ask. We can literally ask for the frequencies that will help. But what are the frequencies there to help? The frequencies aren't there to help the energy. The frequencies are there to help the relationship with the energy. They're there to help shift our perception of the energy so that we're no longer misperceiving it, but we can see it in right relationship. So instead of fear, suddenly the whole level of meaning we've created around it, stop seeing it as this demonic, fearful, evil thing. And we're suddenly like, oh, wait, I don't have to fear this. And the fear gets relieved and it transforms, and we can see the perfection, and we can be this light. And literally, we transform our experience of the energy. And it transforms. It's almost like we change the code. And suddenly it's like, holy cow, there's that energy. We see it so beautifully and different. It's the most fascinating thing. I've had that happen in many different ways, but you can do it just by simply going to these levels. Like, we think this is the reality and this is the world and the three-dimensional gross physical form and all this is it. This is reality. We're so convinced, and by our ability to observe it and do this and do that, that's the holy grail. It's like, man, we're playing with like Legos. we're in the kiddie land side of it, and nothing's wrong with that. But there's this easier, more accessible way. Some people call it going within. It's just really about accessing more of what we are and aligning with that power. And then when we bring that presence to whatever's happening, we can access this incredible intelligence that we often call and recognize as genius. It's my favorite word for it. We literally, everybody can access genius and expand into this level of knowing that doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't need to make sense. That's our need. It just is. And we begin to access it and bring it through, and it transforms things, and it heals, and it brings the right frequency without us even having to dissect or name it or classify it. We can do that. But sometimes we slow ourselves down in trying to do that. Versus when we can say, would you like the healing, or would you like to just classify the process first? Let me finish classifying the process and getting all the steps down. Okay, now I'll take the healing. It's like, all right, whichever way you want to do it is fine. But no, the end goal is the same, the healing. Now, there is a value in classifying these things for others who are seeking to, they're still maybe stuck in I need to understand first before I'll surrender to this other aspect of myself. And that's great. And I think that's the work your show may help some start to connect the dots and see there really is no separation from what we've been trying to observe and create frameworks to classify and figure out. And, we're infants in that department. But there's this rich place of genius that allows us to access and do things like the movie The Matrix talks about, like that it's really real. There's a wonderful podcast called it's about the autistic non-speaking community, the telepathy tapes. Wonderful.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard of that? So
Yes.
my wife and I finished the main part of season 1. There's a season 2 coming out. But I mention it because as I'm listening to it, it was so heart validating to hear science coming in a humble way to acknowledge genius and to acknowledge the savants and to acknowledge the ability that we all have to access this greater level of consciousness that knows. And one guy was an autistic, they call them spellers or non-speakers, but he was explaining how he would literally see hats. It reminded me of Harry Potter. He'd be taken to this dimension where he'd see these hats and they'd have their labels on it. It might be Steinbeck, and he'd put it on, and all of a sudden he knows all the Steinbeck writings. Then he'd put on another one, and it'd be some other writer, right? And there's these ways that we can be guided to access information and bring it through. I do it all the time. It's part of my life's work, not just music, but talks, books, just information that I didn't study this stuff. It just comes through. Now, my ability to get out of the way personality wise and integrate with it is the better I can do that, the more pure it comes through, right? But as I do that, to me, it's just exemplifying what I think many of us are now beginning to awaken to that has long existed. These abilities to expand into working with the frequencies, accessing the information and bringing it through much faster than would typically be expected. And then its utility. Like, what is the utility? Its utility is freedom from suffering and pain in some cases, not all cases. Pain is not always just going to be necessarily eradicated forever, because pain, I think, is in some senses subjective. Like, it's just information in a certain way that if we're resistant to it, we call it pain. Whereas if we surrender, it's just discomfort. And then there's another level of surrender where it just becomes information, right? So, so all that to say, as we're expanding, we will experience some discomfort, maybe pain, that we can transform to discomfort and eventually to just information, to where this birthing of the new human, and I know that sounds crazy, but I wrote a song called New Human not too long ago with a dear friend named Rachel Sebastian, who's in hospice right now. And we brought it through by listening what was coming. And we brought this whole song called New Human through. And what was beautiful is the telepathy tapes talks about the new human. I was just like, we're listening. I'm just like, this is so beautiful. It's just, but that we're being called to recognize the conditioning of society, the conditioning and all this separation of, even what we've made science to be. It even reflects on that. I remember it saying something, I can't remember exactly what, but I think one of the interviewers called it scientism. That we created a new religion. It's like, yeah, that's not what it's supposed to be. But our ability to inquire and to humbly inquire and to align ourselves and receive these insights that benefit the whole are powerful. Like that, the beauty and the magic of that, as we access more of ourselves and that genius begins to come through, is almost like the beauty of watching your favorite singer in a live concert. There's just magic to it. It's just beautiful. It's just, do we have to have it? You don't have to have it, but you get to have it. That's kind of how I see this whole dance with frequency, with exploring more of who we are. And then we begin to trust it more and stop trusting the limited, conditioned aspects. And then we begin to integrate those aspects of ourselves so we can be both in this dimension, exploring in an integrated way and realizing as we're exploring the more, the beauty of it all, like it all begins to like sync and it becomes this dance, this harmony, this symphony of life, So that's to me where we're being reminded we can go. And as we do the work to shift and heal and integrate these frequencies that feel better, like the one you talked about, that help remove the blocks and even speed up the pace in which we do it, suddenly the dance becomes so much, just so much beauty. So there is so much love and beauty we begin to resonate with, see, and receive as we do that. And that's what I'm most grateful for.
And I love how there's so much mystery to it as well.
Yeah.
Mystery in that there's an unfolding.
Hmm.
And I mean, an example I discovered through being hypnotized that one of my spirit plants was parsley.
Hmm.
And, not to go too deep into exactly what the frequency of parsley is that's helped healed me, the fascinating thing is that parsley has spontaneously popped up in multiple places in my yard. And how that happens, like it's, I love the mystery of it. Like somebody could say, oh, somebody planted parsley 5 miles away and a bird ate it and came and pooped while it was crossing your yard. And that
Right.
happened a few times and the seeds landed a few places, but my neighbors don't have parsley. There's an energetics to it where you
Yeah.
attract something that heals you when you are ready.
Yeah.
And the mystery of it keeps you, I think, keeps you drafting in that direction because
Mm.
it's even in marketing, they call it the scent of information. I mean, people follow it. There's a design to it. We're curious.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity, I think, is necessary for genius, and it leads you
Exactly.
into areas you wouldn't normally go because you've got this driving curiosity to go find out what's going on. So, why is there parsley growing in 4 areas of my yard that I didn't plant? Doesn't matter. Do I go sit with it? Yeah,
Mm.
I do.
Mm. That's beautiful.
Um, so the mystery of it is so beautiful. And I think that science gives a framework to give us a comfort and also the ability to create and replicate. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is beautiful that we are figuring out our agency and how to take a frequency and harness it and then use it to heal. It goes both ways, yin and yang. We can also blow ourselves up, but I mean, it's gorgeous that we figured out how to amplify a certain frequency band to heal bone or to heal skin or, to heal whatever it is. And that is elegant. And yes, there are both. So as we heal as a society, we're going to see both.
Yes,
And I think the
exactly.
more of the rough patches we hit, I think that's a good sign, right? I mean, the more resistance we have as a society and the more big things happen that are perceived as negative, there's equal positive going on at all times. So
Exactly. And
you
as
just
we
kind of take
shift,
it.
but like you know the cycles of, like, as we shift and um choose again to elevate as a humanity, and there's the birthing. You could almost think of it like birthing a baby. You have the contractions, you have the pain, the breathing, the whatever. The more we resist, the more traumatic that can feel. But as we birth something new, and that is happening, like we're birthing something new once again. We've done it before, but we get to choose differently. Like we get to bring a lot of the remembrance to this birthing that will not necessarily be the same as any other time. Quote, this is a unique expression of a birthing of humanity's consciousness and remembering and accessing our, like, integrating with our genius that can be very, well, is unique, but also can be very empowering without the tragic um, idea of, okay, but then we get destroyed, right? Because there's a lot of, you know, even though time is like this illusory thing, a lot of us have remembrances of experiencing a timeline in more of a chronological way. There's these memories and fears around as we begin to awaken and as we begin to access these things. and clearing and healing that trauma, that fracture, that block is also something that can be done with the alignment and access of these frequencies that come from, you mentioned it at the beginning, source energy. Like all of it comes from source energy. All of it is an extension of source energy. Like energy is like the real foundation, right? And all of it, shows up in all these different ways. And at the heart of the energy is the source itself, whatever that is. I won't even get into all of that. But that energy, when we're able to begin to align with that source, it brings the right energy, the right frequencies, the right antidote to that fracture. And it can be as simple as us asking for help. That's what I was doing this morning. I was like, all right, I feel these different things that feel like blocks. They feel like impurities, not from the limited conditioned, dogma of religion and all of that, but just in my soul, like they don't feel harmonious anymore, right? It's like, you know what? Help me release these and let go. I'll give you an example, like the idea of evil. The knowledge of good and evil is this separation, right? That is okay. It's a beautiful construct or a beautiful design. Yet, when we can release this belief in evil, it begins to bring us back to this time before we had the knowledge of good and evil. And it begins to heal the fracture and remove the block. And suddenly we begin to experience life more in tune with the true essence of what we are, and how the essence sees life, how the source of life sees it, the divine, if you will. So as we do that, back to the example. So I asked for, in the past, I learned it this way, that we can ask, man, I was listening to, I call it aligning with source and listening to the higher levels of consciousness, listening to that oneness consciousness. Some people call it Christ consciousness. Whatever it is, I was listening to it and being taught that there is no evil. That's what it was teaching me. It's like there really is no evil. There is nefarious energy and benevolent energy and all that, but evil is kind of like this fracture. And I'm like, really? Like, oh, what about the beheadings? What about terrorism? What about molestation? What about this? And I'm going through like everything I could think of as evil. I'm like, what about this? I don't believe that, It's like that it's your perception and your conditioning that's seeing it as evil and labeling it that way and creating the separation. But all consciousness is your consciousness. I'm like, oh. It's like, so the consciousness behind beheading, the consciousness behind all these things you just named, that's your consciousness. You're creating an illusion of separation to believe it's not your consciousness, but it is. All consciousness is your I'm like, oh my God. It's like, okay. So you keep throwing this judgment. The reason you are to love your neighbor as yourself is because your neighbor's consciousness is yourself. So I once heard, it's not a love your neighbor as yourself isn't an analogy or a metaphor. It's like a reminder that you reap what you sow. So you keep judging this way. Let the judgment go, and it will enable you to heal and release these blocks. But sometimes we have to ask the highest aspects of ourselves to help. And so I said, okay, help. I don't know how to let this belief in evil go. And it felt like someone pulled a rug from inside my body, viscerally felt this whoosh, kind of get yanked out of me. And I no longer believed in evil right then and there. I mean, it was the weirdest, like the before and after was such night and day. Like it was a knowing that happened, like, oh. And I've never since then believed in evil, and I don't see things that way anymore. But that's an example of, like, how do I explain that? Like, can I do a process map for that? The only thing I can say is the awareness got clear, I really listened to the that source of life and that knowing teaching me, that genius, and then realized, okay, I don't know how to let go. Help me. And then, whew. So today I was doing a similar process with those feelings of it, something I was becoming aware of within me that just didn't feel as high frequency as I wanted to. And so I just asked for help to remove them. And that it's a very, it's almost like we have instant healing at our fingertips just by asking for help. It makes me want to cry because it's like, it's so much faster. you know,
So much faster.
it really
And
is.
I so deeply appreciate your vulnerability in sharing all of this. I mean, you're such a beautiful example of what masculinity is when it's comfortable being vulnerable. I mean,
Mm,
it's phenomenal what comes through because you not only heal you, John, but you're healing so many others just by
mm,
offering another way to be or to think about something. And what's also so phenomenal about you, something that my listeners don't know about well, maybe they do actually by proxy. They know that I went to a evangelical Christian school, which means you did too.
that's
So
right.
shedding the idea of evil when you come from an evangelical background is
mm,
quite the feat. So
yeah,
hats off to you. That's a big one. That's a big one. Um,
it's yeah, very relieving.
Yes, and so that leads me to my final question. Something else popped in that I just feel would be the icing on the cake, and this is a personality question, right?
You
But
got
it's
it.
more than that because it's really going to help when I help people regenerate their skin, we use plant oils. And what I'm discovering is as we do the fascia release and the wrinkles start to release and they're able to um access the nutrients in the plant oils that are present in the skin to rebuild themselves, what I'm being told by a lot of clients, and I mean a lot of clients. In fact, every client I'm working with right now has said this in their own way that they're experiencing a tremendous amount of emotional release. And my
Yeah.
question is, one, I know that the fascia is essentially the Akashic record of the body. So if they're massaging it in a way that's releasing trauma, that's one aspect. But I have a suspicion, a deep suspicion, that the plant oils that are available within the skin that they're applying and keeping on their skin morning and night, so 24 hours a day, they're working with these plants on a chemical level. I know there's a waveform there that is also healing them. Is it the case that the wave form of the particle are one and the same on two ends of the spectrum, and that if the particle form is going to heal you, the waveform will then emotionally heal you?
Great question. Let's see. So, yes, the way that we engage with energy emotionally is like a composite of many aspects. So, we're dealing with energy in motion, emotion. We're dealing with meaning that we ascribe to it, even without words, because we can feel the same energy and have this subtle form of meaning that takes it as fear, releasing that meaning, suddenly it's excitement, arousal, it's whatever it is. The point being is emotion is actually different levels of creation at the same time, simultaneously, if you will. Frequency, it's meaning, it's sensation, it's all these different aspects. So when it comes to the waveform that you're talking about, that is the aspect or the more subtle body of the particle, the more subtle aspect of this wonderful physical item that comes with these other aspects. Think of astral, emotional, physical, etc. And then the subtle wave frequency aspect. When that brings specific frequencies, they can work as the antidote on the area that is fractured at that level. And often that is experienced as emotion. So, yes, you are correct in that it can bring both an emotional antidote as well as what we think of as a physical antidote or even on other levels. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And absolutely. And I do know neurologically and biologically that every wrinkle originated with an emotion.
Mm,
It's a repetitive emotion that expresses and
yes, yes,
creates your expressions, but also creates your internal chemical environment.
yes.
And it will either degrade your face, your skin is your largest organ, or it will keep it in health.
Like
And
self
so,
judgment, correct? Like self judgment
yes.
and can create that kind of thing, yes.
So what you just validated is that if in the future I will have a lot more confidence about this because I my suspicion was so intense
Yeah,
that if somebody has a wrinkle in a certain area, you I know what to do to fix it mechanically. But the beautiful thing now is that we can just leave it up to the essence or the energy or the wave of the plant and the emotion that's created from the person taking agency or stepping into their agency through meditation. The waveform also will compound the
yes.
correction, so to speak,
Yep.
the realignment with what we would call youth, but really just properly functioning organs.
Vitality. Yeah.
Vitality. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I mean, plants, yeah. Plants,
There was
when you work
something that,
with,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
please, no, please.
There was something that was coming through before that it was like so much information I couldn't get it all out, but the other side of it was the physical correspondence of the emotional and of the so every even the you could almost think of it as vibration, like what is it called, somatics, I guess, where you've got the frequency and you put it on a plate, put some sand on it, and change the
Oh,
frequency.
cymatics?
Just like, thank you, that's it. So when we're looking at, we know that form follows frequency, and
Mhm.
we know that we can observe patterns. So what you're seeing is that connection of like the frequency. The emotion is a frequency or a corresponding frequency, but it's not just the frequency. It's also the level of meaning we're creating. It's also the level of like there's other subtle things in it, right? To simplify a framework. So with
Mhm.
with that emotion though, it has a corresponding physical like form follows that frequency. So it's going to show different patterns as you're observing. That's a really cool, like as you were saying, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited because this just blows open a whole other level of access for dialogue with clients as we go about healing their skin. There's also some beautiful emotional work that's going on there and repatterning.
Indeed.
I mean, you have to remodel the fascia in order to reverse the wrinkling process. Because you
Oh
can
man.
have tight skin, tight muscles, but if your fascia is still all crimped and doesn't slide, there's some trauma that's still stuck there and it's going to recreate the age.
And I have a question for you on that. So,
Yeah.
recently I was massaging, just kind of intuitively being guided to massage my jawline, and there was so much
Mm.
hardened pain in it, like almost like
Mm.
I was finding little, not rocks, but like just places that were pain. Like right now, when I do it, doesn't hurt at all. But when I started, I was like, oh my God, what? It was like crunchiness or something. And as I'm
Yes.
massaging it and relieving it, it was very painful. Now it's smooth and like doesn't hurt at all when I do this. But is that part of the fascia? Is that things that are stuck in
Yes.
the fascia? Okay, I was curious about
Yes.
that.
So what the physical process of what happens is when your body stores things, it's energetic, but then over time it starts to crystallize and become
Yeah,
form
that's what it
and not
feels like.
and
Okay.
not up. And that's what myofascial release is about.
Okay.
So interestingly, I had a lot around my eyes. It really was painful, but I got it all rubbed out. I was sore for about a day and a half. But interestingly enough, in all of the reading that I've done, and really what I want to do is go in and meditate and really go inside and find some answers inside. But
Yep.
I'm not quite to the point where you are yet. I still like to validate externally.
Sure, sure.
I'm getting there. Everyone's on their journey.
Yep.
Um, However, when we sustain traumas that we perceive to be coming through our face in direct communication with others, that's where it will not.
Ah,
So if, and aside from that, Louise Hay did a lot of work on where trauma goes and gets stored in the body
okay.
of various types of trauma. But if it's a communication face-to-face trauma, it'll get stored in the face, and or if you've been objectified, it'll also store in the area that was objectified.
Oh, wow. How about that?
Hmm.
That
And
is,
there's a direct physical correlation.
so I can't
And
wait
your
to look that
energy,
up.
the way that you fracture that energy, because that part of you is tapped down and blocked, the vitality isn't moving. So you have to physically go in and remove it and or heal it emotionally to then be able to restore the vitality through those meridians in the way
And
that
so
it
this
needs.
conversation has helped me have a um, instant recognition of the emotion behind it. Because as you were talking
Mm,
about it, I was remembering like, okay, oh, communication, okay, and then feeling that like there's this part in my body where I feel the energy stored that corresponds to like, oh, that's a little trauma. Things I've been working on around communication, the childhood um, quote wounds, traumas around communication that I can feel there's still another layer of um, where I have to bring that presence to it and then bring the integration and transform it. And I'm doing it as we speak, so I'm talking about it. But it, I do think that's the process. Like what you're doing is you're helping people find the physical blocks, address them, bring these waveforms and particle as I'm using your language, but bring these frequencies and these useful elements to it to be act as antidotes. And then they have to bring the consciousness to change the coding that resulted in the physical because if you just change like if I just remove the blocks and just like you said the fascia, if I don't change the consciousness, the form will still follow the coding that's still there. So you have to also address the coding that created the pattern in the first place. And that's where the traumatic, I think, where the presence and that level that can defy logic can help. But they all work together. It's not that they're separate, it's that they're very fulfilling when in tandem or when done in conjunction, right? It's so like one without the other isn't as fulfilling, right? So I can think of many analogies that work that way, but the the ability to bring them all together brings this fulfillment and this harmony that is multi-dimensional in one sense, because you're working in you're working in multiple dimensions, but you're bringing harmony and alignment with them. And when you do that, it's it's not only fulfilling, but it it's what brings us in alignment with what we're to be. It's like the best and highest expression of ourselves. Does that make sense?
complete
Cool,
sense.
cool. So that's it. So that excites me. It's like, oh, that makes sense. So the work you're doing is really helping people do that, helping people access those different levels and going deeper with well, not going deeper, but working from the multiple levels of the issue. So that's really beautiful.
Thank you. Right. And life's holographic. So if you get the hang of how to heal yourself through your skin, it's just a gateway, right? It can be a
Mm-hmm.
gateway.
That's it.
And you figure out how to heal everything else.
That's right.
And it's really amazing what clears up for people when they start to heal their skin for themselves
Hmm.
and how other aspects, other areas of their life will just kind of magically fall into place.
I love that. I love that. That's so cool.
Mm. It's just so fun.
Yeah, it is, man. And I have to say, it's so funny to me to think back. We were talking about this before about how our timelines have reconnected now. And, we've gone through the experiences we've gone through. And it's just fascinating how similar they brought us. Uh,
Yeah.
like
At the
coming
same
from,
age.
yeah, same age and similar time. It's like so wild, man. And the cool thing to me is, I was feeling this this weekend driving back to Atlanta. My wife and I had gone to see family for the New Year's. We're coming back, listening to the end of the telepathy tapes, and I was just
Mm.
feeling this sense of awe and beauty of how many of us are beginning to shed the separation and the old narratives of limitation and awaken to this. It almost like reminds me of a movie or some sort of sci-fi thing where we're awakening to what really is, like what we've forgotten, that it's like wow, and it's being proven in quote, in quotations, but being proven in these ways that defy the ability to gaslight people that it's not real anymore. You know?
Yes.
Like the way it's coming out now, it's just like, okay, you can't hide this anymore. It's like it's the cat is coming out of the bag, as they say. So I'm really, and that's been so relieving for me, because there were years where Kathy and I would hide what we were doing, like, and we
Really.
got guidance to do that. Like, it was prudent to do so. Like, we weren't supposed to be advertising, wow, we're accessing these higher levels of genius. Like, I have a whole book of years of stuff we brought through that I haven't even
Wow.
published. It's just like volumes of questions and answers and information, and no one knew we were doing it. And
Mm.
then finally, after 3 years, we began to let people know slowly. And then I came out as a teacher, not as a, you know, I'm not a quote teacher in that, um, as hearing that's my role. That's part of the role I get to play. So I stepped into that role to teach and to share the things I was learning. And the before and after of that was, we felt like we were hiding it, and like, because people just didn't respond, didn't understand. Now you can bring this out, and the consciousness as a whole has shifted enough to where people are curious and more, ah, and it's, the dots are starting to connect, and the word is getting out that we are so much more. So that's exciting to me.
And there's so much more to space time than we could have even fathomed. Everyone's
Yeah.
so excited to, the spiritual community seems to have like a split. Like some are so excited because we're moving into something other. And there's so much here that we don't even know about. It's like, where are you going?
Yeah.
Let's play in the sandbox. It's incredible
Yeah.
here. It's incredible. Space time is incredible.
One last thing, the healing of the traumas, I think, is what helps
Mm.
us move beyond that resistance to it. Because even for me, been doing work with, been shown like these timelines, and that we have multi-dimensional aspects of ourselves and many timelines and all this stuff. And some of those require our presence. Like, some of those fears that come up in blocks aren't even coming from like this lifeline or this timeline. It's coming from these other aspects that we, even culturally, sometimes there's these historical traumas, just like we have childhood traumas. You've got cultural and historical traumas that, if you can bring your awareness to, you can actually shift your perception of and bring healing to. So the healing is the shift in your perception, and then you can begin to integrate with those things and see it so differently. It's like you're the unicorn in the freaking goat herd. Not that makes you better. It's that your perception has shifted to see the magic and the and perfection, instead of the limitation and the fear. And so
Yeah.
it shifts how you want to play in the sandbox. So that to me is the work.
Yes.
that many of us who feel like we're stuck and fearing it, but want to be able to play and be the astronaut, you know, or the spiritual physicist or whatever it is, and explore. It just requires that work to heal the blocks, to do, use the finding the practices that work for you to do that work. Then once you've done that, you're able to expand more, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Absolutely. Well, for those that are listening that want to learn more about you, I'll go ahead and link your podcast and all of your
Thank you.
social
Thank you.
in the description box. And is there anything that you want to let the listeners know before we go? Anything we haven't touched on that you want to share about yourself or anything?
Just the reminder that there is something truly loving and way beyond what we can conceptually grasp, that's at the essence of everything. All the different names and attempts and labels and all of that stuff, but that a lot of this is designed to help us remember we have access to that at any time, and we can actually experience what that loving intelligence and essence has for us. The let's just call it the source of life. It's the easiest way for me to say it. And that as we do that, it helps us come into right relationship with not only who we are, but expanding our awareness into what everything is. And we have this dance and this harmony and we experience that magic and that beauty that is our birthright, really. And at the heart of that is bliss, but bliss being dynamic, meaning not like our birthright is bliss, but it's not like one thing. Oh, bliss is in happiness? Well, that's a form of bliss. Bliss is dynamic. Bliss is also in grief. Bliss is also in all these things. But claiming our birthright so we can have the full experience of this journey in a blissful way. That's life more abundantly. That's what the whole purpose of coming back to and aligning with the source of life is about. And then beginning to experience our own gifts. As we do that, we start accessing abilities. Just like your strong intuition that I knew there was something to that, right? Like you start accessing these greater abilities and reclaiming them versus what society or upbringing or even some of your life experiences have conditioned you to shut down. You begin to reclaim them and come in right harmony. You heal the fractures. You integrate, and suddenly that helps you expand and experience so much fulfillment, so much bliss, so much beauty of life now. Like not later, but heaven now. So that's the new human, new earth that I think we're invited to remember and choose, if we will. So that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
John.
you. So grateful to be
Mm,
here.